from your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Tuesday morning, August 2nd, 2023. The dust has settled on the Major League Baseball trade deadline. The White Sox lost last night 2-0, even though Jesse Schultz pitched really well. The Chicago White Sox were busy, moving a total of 7 players before the deadline in 5 separate trades, with Jake Burger and Keenan Middleton moving yesterday. It was a bittersweet moment for Jake Burger as he spoke to White Sox reporters yesterday. Here's what Burger said from MLB.com Scott Merkin on Twitter.
I'm grateful for the White Sox and the organization for believing in me when it didn't seem like a lot of other people believed in me, and the fans believing in me coming back from injury. So it's a lot of good memories here, and it's my son got to see me play in a White Sox jersey first, and, but on the flip side of that, I'm going to Miami and get to play, make a push for the playoffs, and in the wild card hunt. I'm really excited to play my heart out for Miami as well.
In exchange for Burger, the White Sox added more to their pitching pile, adding left-handed pitcher Jake Eder, who will be joining the Birmingham Barons in AA. In total, the White Sox added 2 catchers and 6 pitchers to their farm system, areas of big need. But the reason they are needs is the shortcomings of the White Sox front office. And while Rick Hahn was busy tearing down the roster he built, now there's the question of what's the plan moving forward. So let's start there. Joining me is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. And Jim, how would you grade the work Rick Hahn did prior to the trade deadline?
Part of me doesn't want to give him a grade just because it feels like saying he got a B or he got whatever, like a passing grade, like encourages him and encourages the White Sox to stick with him. Like, it was fine. Like, I'll grade it on a fine. Like, could have done more. Like, Dylan Cease, it seemed like the market was primed to deal him, but when you see like the lack of comparable pitchers moving, like Justin Verlander went and Max Scherzer went, but Steve Cohen paid so much of their freight and got one prospect in return for each, basically, that not really comparable. Jack Flaherty ended up going to the Orioles, and that was for very little. That was a rental. So in terms of getting the proper package in return for Cease, like, there's no evidence that like teams had the appetite to give up that kind of prospect capital for him. So like, I think he could have done more, but if he went to the Dodgers for like another catcher who is far away from the majors, and Michael Busch, who's like a 25-year-old second baseman who struggled in his first attempt at conquering the majors, like, that would have felt light, even though that would have theoretically been like 2 top 100 prospects. So like, I think I'm fine with what he did, but it is, it's not exciting, because the White Sox are back at where they started back in 2016, 2017, with really nothing to show for it.
Yeah, we get to have the Dylan Cease conversation again next year. I don't think him getting moved this offseason is likely, just because with free agency, teams can just spend cash. They don't need to spend top prospects. If they weren't willing to spend the top prospects now, when there was a clear need, they're probably not going to do it this offseason. So we get to revisit this conversation next season during the trade deadline, when there's only a year and a half left of control for Dylan Cease. But there are more examples in recent history of those types of pitchers being moved. Luis Castillo from Cincinnati to Seattle is a prime example, and probably the outcome the White Sox will have with Dylan Cease next year. I think the odds are very low that Dylan Cease pitches for the 2025 Chicago White Sox, Jim. But it does raise the question of, like, what's the plan moving forward for the White Sox after all this activity? And I want to read a quote from Rick Hahn during his press conference after the trade deadline, and these quotes come from Vinny Duber of CHGO. And Hahn said, quote, "We still have many impactful talents in Chicago. Competing for the postseason is viable in 2024. In all candor, sitting here 55 minutes after the deadline, proclaiming this is how we are going to get there in 2024 isn't exactly our mission. The organization is much, much stronger for 2024 and beyond. What that looks like at the big league level in 2024, let's get to the end of the season. You will hear directly what the plan is for the people in charge. End quote. You will hear directly what the plan is for the people in charge. Not you will hear directly from me what the plan is, Jim. What the plan is for the people in charge. And honestly, GMs of non-contending teams after the trade deadline have very little work other than plan for next season. Hahn did what he does best, which is tear down the roster. Now you need someone to build it up. Hahn is not that type of GM, clearly. So the White Sox should just fire him now. Tuesday should have been the last time we heard from Rick Hahn, White Sox GM, Jim.
It's hard to disagree. Like, I'm trying to think of like a, reason why. And yeah, not really. It's hard to know if that quote is humility or, whether he's chastened or whether that's just false humility. Like, if I pretend that I should be fired now or that my job's in jeopardy now, then people will be okay, or at least, like I'll have shown the appropriate amount for the poor job I'm doing and maybe earn a little bit of goodwill when I'm still in that job at the end of September. Like, that's kind of how I read that, just because we can't trust that Jerry Reinsdorf has any interest in making the team better. Just assume that Jerry Reinsdorf has no standards for excellence or even competence, and, work backwards from there. That's kind of how I look at it. They can talk about like how disappointed he is and how grumpy he is. And he's a very cranky boy, and whatever Kenny Williams says about how, unhappy he is and how it's not pleasant to be around him right now. Frowny face. But there's just no evidence that like anything matters in terms of failure. So that's kind of how I look at it, is what results in him staying? And then what does he accomplish by saying this? And it probably just takes a little bit of heat off him saying like that, I still believe it. Because that was an unpopular quote when he said that he thought he was still the man for the job, because there's no evidence that he is. And certainly everything that's happened since hiring his own manager that has shown no effectiveness and really no relevance to the proceedings. That certainly no points in his favor since he said that. So humility or modesty is one of the ways to go. So I'm just assuming he's chosen that course, and I'll still remain very surprised if anything material changes at the end of the off season. But if you want hope, if you want like a chance that like something will change at the end of the year, and like Rick Hahn's end of season address will also be his farewell address of sorts, then, this would be maybe the start of it, but I'm skeptical.
Yeah, he hates when we speculate on his decision-making and what the White Sox are doing. Like, he doesn't like it, but you're opening the door, Rick, with this comment. Like, you are hinting at the fact that it may not be you, or you are publicly admitting it may not be you that ultimately decides what 2024 is about. And he also said in other quotes that there's plenty of time between now and 2024 to decide what that season's going to be about. No, there isn't, dude. It's August, okay? Mm-hmm. In 2 months, the regular season will end. You better start preparing, because after the postseason, you got some difficult decisions to make with contract options within 10 days of the World Series ending. And then it's November, and then it's the GM meetings, and what are you going to do, slow play this? Or are you going to then, at that moment, decide to tell your paying customers, like, what the direction is? Like, to tell fans, I need you guys to just wait a couple more months, and then I'll tell you what direction we're going in. Suggest, like, what was the plan going to the trade deadline? Like, what did you want to accomplish? Was it just dumping expiring contracts? Okay, you did that. Mission accomplished. But Jake Berger wasn't an expiring contract. So how did that deal come about? And we'll talk about Jake Eder later in this show as the White Sox add him to their pitching pile. But he did the teardown. He made a lot of moves. He was busy before the deadline. He did not find a deal to move Dylan Cease. But at this moment, I don't think he should be the one to find a deal in moving Dylan Cease. And I just don't really see any reason for keeping him around. Like, logically, the brain says, fire him. Okay, he did his work. He deconstructed the house. He demoed the house that he built. Mm-hmm. Now it's time to take the next 2 months, create a search committee, speak with people around the league, around baseball, and who could be some good candidates to interview. So when October comes around, you get that opportunity, you can move quickly and find the person that you want to hire to take over the baseball organization. That's how the other 29 teams, I assume, would operate, Jim. But to your point, this is the White Sox. This is Jerry Reinsdorf. They're not going to operate like that. And that just adds more fuel to the fire and rage that White Sox fans have right now at the organization. And Hahn is running out of friends in the media. Like Chris DeLuca from the Chicago Sun-Times, he wrote a great column about Hahn's press conference. And Ryan McGuffey and Chuck Garfien on NBC Sports Chicago had sharp criticism at the White Sox front office and saying that it's not fair to those that cover the White Sox and to White Sox fans in what is going on. And that type of criticism, I hope they still have a job after this season, as the White Sox enter the last year of their television contract with NBC Sports Chicago next year. I still hope they have a job, and then they're not fired for providing honest feedback and what has transpired. So that's the cloud hanging over Rick Hahn here, who made all these decisions. So for him to come out of this and not have something prepared, Jim, to at least give a glimpse, like if you're going to tell reporters that we plan on competing in 2024, okay, do you have something to back that up? No, we got time. Mm-hmm. Okay, whatever. We're done with you. You can go. Somebody else come in now.
Yeah, I think maybe the one benefit of him taking the stance is that it does make Pedro Grifal's job easier, because if he's not fired yet, or as long as he's in the chair, and if, depending on if the White Sox have a change of plans in mind, basically turns Grifal into a lame duck if Hahn goes anywhere right now. And if Hahn says we are, not planning on contending in 2024, that turns Grifal into maybe not a lame duck in terms of his employment, but certainly just an empty uniform in the clubhouse when the players in the clubhouse are saying well, we're not planning on competing. What the hell are we playing for? I guess I'm playing for jobs or my next, employer or whatnot. So there's, I imagine it makes Grifal's job harder, just trying to keep everybody on the same page and motivated. So maybe that's the one reason for any kind of caginess, is just if you pretend that a strong final 2 months for Oscar Colas and maybe a successful audition for a guy like Lenine Sosa or Michael Kopech having a strong last month and a half. If those things can all of a sudden, here's a piece there, is a piece there, there's a piece there. Okay, maybe there is a way to, if not push for 2024, at least be in a position to benefit from some more positive breaks or players being ahead of schedule in 2024. So I think that's, one reason I can see for why, if he does have some plans to set the clock to plan more towards 2025, it probably makes sense to do it when you're trading veterans at the end of the year or, declining options or whatnot. And then being able to have everybody who you acquire in the offseason, or everybody show up to spring training with a better idea of the mission in mind, versus just completely mailing it in and really sinking whatever authority or presence Grifal has.
Is it bad to say I don't care?
No, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, the White Sox have given no reason for anybody to care about Grifal, and just exactly what happens to him. Grifal's done nothing. We've talked about this, just his lack of personality, and there's just and also with No Sox Fest, which is a good place for a manager to talk directly to fans and get to know everybody. Rick Renteria had a very valuable ice-breaking experience when he took over for Robin Ventura. And then the following year, when everybody was happy with the effort, despite the losing record, he had a very positive reception. with White Sox fans and, was able to answer some questions directly. So like he was able to bank a lot of goodwill, I think, with just how, and the story's written about how he answered those direct questions and those interactions with fans. And so Grifol never had that. Grifol hasn't shown, like, I can't say one thing about him except what he doesn't know, which is like that he doesn't have, doesn't even think about going on the internet, and he doesn't can't name a favorite band. Like he's not a human, or he has not presented himself as a human being, aside from the fact that he seems to have a lovely family. And so that he must have some ability to connect person to person, but like to fans, there's no evidence of that. So like without that, like, yeah, just, he seems irrelevant. And with the White Sox just plummeting into this current state on his watch, like no reason to think he's special at this job. So yeah, I mean, that's why, like, if you say you don't care, like that's an honest, and I think, honestly found reaction, not just, nihilism, speaking, or cynicism, just like, yeah, what do we know about this guy? Like, what can White Sox fans say about him that, creates a certain kind of pull or magnetism? There is none.
So moving forward, we're not going to gaslight our listeners or other White Sox fans that are listening to this episode, like the franchise is currently doing. What do you think the plan is right now for 2024 for the Chicago White Sox?
Based on who they acquired, their initial assignments, minor league assignments, and then probably, be able to tell certainly what they do with September and call-ups and whatnot, it seems like 2025 is the goal.
Yeah, I agree with that.
A lot of guys at Double-A, a lot of overlap with pitchers and catchers, being the primary target. So like there could be opportunities for trade. Like if guys are working out, if it happens to be a positive thing where like all of a sudden we have more arms than spots, like, okay, maybe you can direct some resources elsewhere. Or, if they sign a pitcher to like a multi-year deal and he ends up filling the job pretty well. There are opportunities, I think, to rearrange who they've gotten. And then like when you look at the middle infield situation too, like Colson Montgomery, Jacob Gonzalez, what happens there if they both arrive on a similar timetable? Like there will be opportunities to work that out. But I think like having one full season is probably the best way to do that. Like, and given that they're a major market and given that they're like, there are no benefits to super tanking 2 years in a row, or fewer benefits to doing that. Like, sure. Like make a mild push towards filling out a full, comprehensive roster and see if you can get lucky with some guys being ahead of schedule. But 2025 seems like what they're lining up to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you have someone come in from the outside and run the White Sox organization, it gives them an opportunity to shed some serious payroll as well for the Chicago White Sox and have a launching point where you could add significant payroll and still have a player payroll around $150 million in 2025 and be able to add significant pieces. There's just so many holes on this roster going into next season. And the White Sox added a lot of players, but they still have so many questions that they need answers for. And they didn't address all the questions before the trade deadline. There's still the issue at second base. I don't know about Oscar Colas in right field. This is not a very good second impression. The first impression wasn't great. The second impression is not great either.
Yeah, his defense has improved, and that's about it.
Yeah, he's a major leaguer defensively. There's no question about that.
And even then, like I should say his routes have improved, and like the confidence of his throws has improved. Like he's still making errors when it comes to collecting the ball, but yeah.
But you got to fill out a rotation. You got to find some interesting arms. I'm not advocating for them to spend money in the bullpen by any stretch. And you got the whole issue at catcher. And we're going to talk about Jake Burger in a moment after a word from our sponsors, but there's some serious pressure now on like Eloy Jimenez and Andrew Vaughn to, I don't know, actually bash. Like, it's time. Let's stop talking about potential. It's time to start showcasing that you can be 25, 30 home run guys. And then you have the whole issue on the left side of the infield with Tim Anderson and Yohan Moncada. So that's why I just don't understand where the White Sox or even Rick Hahn, again, saying that it is viable that we could contend in 2024. Just like it's viable for me that after we record this episode, I checked my Mega Millions ticket and I went over $1 billion, Rick. It's just as viable, in my opinion. And I'm kind of tired of the White Sox trying to sell false goods right now to fans. White Sox fans are not idiots. They know what is going on. It would just be nice that someone within this organization was just transparent and honest with their paying customers. This is a really poor way of doing business, and that's along the lines of what Ryan McGuffey and Chuck Garfien were saying on the White Sox regional network. We're going to take a quick moment for a word from our sponsors, but when we come back, let's talk about the Jake Burger trade, and let's meet some of the new guys the White Sox added before the trade deadline next on the Sox Machine podcast. The biggest acts are visiting Chicago this summer, on top of all the baseball games and other great concerts, theater shows too. It can be quite the chore and headache trying to secure tickets to all of these shows and events. Buying tickets shouldn't be stressful. Use Game Time to purchase your tickets. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their best price guarantee helps eliminate stressing over tickets. If you find tickets in the same section or even row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's why Game Time is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and get $20 off your first purchase using our promo code SOXMACHINE. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
There's no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform that you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy because Indeed does the hard work for you. They show you the candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your description immediately after you post so you can hire faster. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports, and support the show by saying that you heard it on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire Sports. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. Again, Jake Burger was traded to the Miami Marlins. We were doing the live stream on YouTube, which, by the way, for all those that did participate during the live stream, thank you guys. That was by far and away our best live stream as far as viewership. So again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, comments were flowing.
Yes, comments were great.
A lot of updates, a lot of help. It was great.
It was great, yes. So we'll probably stick with that format for future events like this with the trade deadline. As we mentioned in the live stream, Jim and I will be in Nashville for the winter meeting, so maybe it's another opportunity that we could do something like that again during the winter meetings. But Jake Burger traded to Miami was the first breaking news that we had during the live stream about 20 minutes in. It surprised me because I just didn't know how other teams would covet Jake Burger, what they thought of Jake Burger, Jim. There's years of control. He's bashing home runs. But when you look at his swing profile and you look at the data, there are some red flags. But when he makes contact, the ball jumps off his bat, and Miami desperately needs more power. They also acquired Josh Bell, and I like Jake Burger a lot more than Josh Bell. So I can understand where Miami's coming from, that they needed to add more offense. I think they'll get more out of Jake Burger than Josh Bell. But for the White Sox to move Jake Burger, what are they losing here? And how do you make as far as the tenure of Jake Burger? Because it was pretty bittersweet as we played that audio at the beginning part of the show with Burger leaving the White Sox, another former first-round pick, getting traded away by the White Sox. But Jake Burger's story is more than that.
Yeah, it's I was surprised by maybe not surprised, but I noted the reaction of fans and how upset they were. And, when you look at the on-base percentage, 275 OBP, that's really tough to make a living that way if you don't play spectacular defense or you don't hit 40 plus homers and some combination of it. You probably need to have a position. Right now, Burger doesn't quite have a position. I think he has improved in the infield to where if he had on base percentage that started with a 3 with the power he has, like, yeah, you'd be fine playing him there. But since he doesn't, and since he can like have these really rough games, it's unclear exactly what his future is. But, you know, he played a game with a lot of joy. Like he had a, respect for White Sox fans and a connection and a happiness that he liked being there. You could see like a lot of personality in his play. And when you see him leave and you see like the, emotion he has, like, it looks miserable being a White Sox right now. So the fact that he isn't makes you think like, man, you're trading away like a guy who wanted to be here. And like how many people actually want to be here, I think is, like maybe a thought that crosses people's mind, because I mean, I think if you pay people enough, like they will want to be there, and like, if success follows, like it's pretty quick to change that. But in the darkest moment, like, he provided a lot of bright spots just with his resilience and with just some really massive homers, like, exciting, adrenaline charging homers that like make you want to, overturn a car. Just like, just with, like, it's gotta feel good to be that strong. Like that's kind of what goes through my mind when I see a homer like that. That's, I think what stood out to me is just the connection that he forged, even like in such a bad season, nobody's holding him responsible for that.
So the White Sox acquired Jake Eder, which Eder is 24 years old. He's a left-handed pitcher from the Miami Marlins farm system. He was drafted out of Vanderbilt, so out of Jim's backyard. In Double-A this year, Eder in 6 games started, went 29 2/3 innings. He's got a 3.94 ERA. Looking at his strikeout to walk total, the good news, he is striking out batters at a higher than 30% clip. The concerning news, he's almost walking batters at a 13% clip. So this is going to be something we'll have to pay attention to as he joins the Birmingham Barons. Eder in his last start on July 29th, very good. 5 2/3 innings, only allowed 1 hit, which was a home run, 2 runs, 1 of them earned, only walked 2 batters, but struck out 10. And this is a report from Keith Law of The Athletic about Eder. Law wrote, Eder's returning from Tommy John surgery. His four-seamer is 90 to 93 miles per hour, so his velocity is down. The slider is still a plus pitch. He doesn't have a feel for the changeup yet, and he missed 2.5 months this year because of a broken left foot, and that may be impacting as far as his velocity and his ability to push off the rubber. So a couple of things to watch with Jake Eder as he joins the Birmingham Barons. And with this type of scouting report, and obviously we have to take the time, Jim, in actually watching Jake Eder as he begins pitching for the Birmingham Barons. But it's enticing as far as the profile, but just like everyone else the White Sox have acquired before the deadline, I'm not penciling Jake Eder into the White Sox starting rotation on opening day. It sounds like there are some things that he still needs to work on, and the White Sox should still give him time to develop in Double-A and not rush him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, whenever I think of foot injuries, I think of, like, Kelvin Herrera, who just the White Sox thought, like, yeah, he'll get past it, and really didn't happen. So I think you have to respect foot injuries and the kind of impact they have. I think the good news is he's past Tommy John surgery, and he's throwing 5 innings to start. Like, I'm not too worried about the command yet or the walk numbers yet, just because, there's rust, there's, the injury on top of an injury, like unrelated, but you have to make sure that they're not connected. And it's, a road back. I was surprised, to see like, strong feelings about who won this trade one way or another, because I think it's a pretty fair trade. I think in terms of value, like if Berger is what he is, like a 275 or 280 OBP guy who hits a lot of homers when he connects, but like also might hit 200 or less than, like, it's hard to like count on that guy. But also, like, if you're, have a top 100 prospect or like close to it, but has had Tommy John surgery, has a different issue, is dealing with velocity loss, hasn't gotten it back yet, like that doesn't always come back or in a way that's reliable. So like there is risk on both sides. I also think with Berger that, given how irregular his development was between the 2 ruptured Achilles and the pandemic season costing him an opportunity to like have a normal minor league year and just kind of figuring it out as he goes along. Like it's remarkable, like how different he looks from month to month. Like he went from walking 0 times in May to walking 11 times in July. I still have concerns about the hit tool, but like his his patience fluctuates, and he has a certain like ability to forget about terrible games or 2 terrible games in a row, and all of a sudden like really thrash mistakes. So like, I don't think he's a finished product yet either. So like, I don't really have confidence in either side of this deal. Like, where I feel like the White Sox won when it got, pulled one over on Kim Ng, and then like same thing. Like, I don't think, the Marlins needed power. Like, they needed it in the worst way. And like, what if Eder doesn't come back? They have a lot of pitching prospects. Like, maybe Eder's the guy they can let go if they feel like he's not sure they can get him all the way. And like one more year of this, like they might not be able to get even somebody like Jake Berger for him. So I can see like both of these teams trading their guy a year too early, or I could see them trading him right at the right moment before like value collapses and they're left with like a player to be named later. So I think it's a fascinating trade.
The other trade, the White Sox traded Keenan Middleton to the New York Yankees because the Yankees love themselves some White Sox relievers. And the White Sox got in return Juan Carela. And Carela is 21 years old. He's a right-handed pitcher. And in high A this year, he's made 16 starts, 83 and a third innings pitched. So he's going deep into his starts, which is impressive for that level. He's got a 3.67 ERA, striking out batters at 31% clip, walking batters at just 9%. So that's pretty impressive, and probably will be joining the Winston-Salem Dash. Fangraphs' Eric Longenhagen gives Carela a plus grade on his slider. So a 70 grade on the slider, his best pitch, but fastball velocity has been an issue for Carela as he's been working between a couple of fastballs, a 4-seamer and a sinker. Again, he's just 21 years old. This kind of seems like a lottery ticket, Jim, for the White Sox in exchange for Keenan Middleton, who he pitched well for the White Sox. He had a really rough July, but April, May, and June, he was impressive for the team for $800,000, or what ends up being a little more than $500,000 for the White Sox as the Yankees take on the rest of the contract. And we'll find out what Carela could bring to the White Sox. Maybe he can be someone that surprises.
I like, hearing from a guy, or like hearing about a guy that he has like 2 fastballs and he has 2 breaking balls, because like once in a while, like whenever there is like a pitcher who breaks out, like especially in the White Sox farm system, which we know about, like Christian Mena or, Noah Schultz, and this will be kind of interesting because Everett Tieford used to be the guy who would deliver this information to a pitcher and, try to get him to change his approach. And he's been hired by Auburn, was it, for a pitching coach?
Yes.
So like, I'm curious who that person is now, but like, maybe it's like Danny Farquhar or something, but like they would say like, well, we like your 4-seamer more than your 2-seamer. Why don't you just look at that? Or vice versa. Like, we think your slider pairs well with your sinker. Let's see if that runs. Like, given that he has like a plus slider or plus sweeper, and then like, another way to spin a ball and 2 ways to throw a fastball, like there are some permutations the White Sox can experiment with to see if there's one that gets them either onto a relief track, or should he be able to find a third pitch, whether it's like better command of the more slider like breaking ball as opposed to the sweeper, or whether it's the changeup coming into its own, then like maybe he can keep on the starter track. He certainly seems to have the endurance for a starter track and the ability to give some different looks over the course of an outing. And he's, age appropriate for his level. Like, he will need to be, he doesn't have to be protected from the Rule 5 draft. I don't think he'd be likely to be picked in the Rule 5 draft, but he will be eligible for it. So that might be one case of like why the Yankees were willing to give him up, because they didn't really have room for him on their 40-man roster and didn't think they were anytime soon. So they may as well, get somebody they can use now. But I think he's pretty interesting for a prospect, especially one like where the White Sox need starting pitching. Like, he's a feasible project for a starter in A-ball. And if that's not working out, it seems like, based on the scouting reports, that his sweeper would give him like a way to be a breaking ball first pitcher in the bullpen who might be able to find like a fastball that complements it.
Do not add him to the 40-man roster, White Sox. Do not. No one is taking Juan Carela in the Rule 5 draft next year or in the winter. Don't do it. They'll do it. I will not be happy about it, but don't do it. So the White Sox return in trades. We talked about their areas of need. They needed help at catcher. They needed help at pitching, and that's where they addressed a lot of the returns. For catchers, you got Corey Lee from Houston in exchange for Kendall Graveman. He's in AAA. Edgar Caro and Kai Bush. So Caro helping out on the catcher spot, Double-A. He's making some highlights already for Birmingham. Kai Bush not making highlights exactly with Birmingham in his first start, but maybe he'll get the jitters out and he'll be better in his next start with the Barons. And then you got Jake Eder, you got Nick Nastrini from the Los Angeles Dodgers at Double-A. So the Barons getting 3 starting pitchers to add to their mix. We already talked about Juan Carela. He'll help out the Winston-Salem Dash. And then you got Jordan Leisure, who is also part of that Dodgers return. He's been a closer in AAA for the Dodgers system. So we'll see what he can provide to Charlotte. Maybe we'll see him before the end of the season with the White Sox if they need more bullpen help. And then Luis Patino. The White Sox purchased him from the Tampa Bay Rays. And this is another ex-top 100 prospect. Really struggling across all facets this year. But it is an interesting trade, I guess you could call it trade for cash considerations. I think it's worth the risk for the White Sox to go in this route because, again, clearly they need more pitchers in Charlotte. The White Sox should be familiar with Luis Patino. They've seen him, and he's got a reclamation project, and he had a lot of hype at one time, so why not give him a shot, maybe make some adjustments, maybe he pitches suddenly better within the White Sox org. At the very least, you can get maybe somebody that can help out on the bullpen, but this is someone that at one time, Jim, was thought to be a starter.
Yeah, he's had some, he had like a key injury, like an oblique strain at like a key point in his, on the cusp of sticking as a starter that set him back and just hasn't regained it since. Velocity's dropped like at least a tick, maybe 2. Seems like this past year they've converted him to relief and have tried to get, see if he's any more valuable, like throwing a slider more than his fastball. And that doesn't really seem to be paying early returns. So he's kind of a mess right now, but the White Sox, like one of the few luxuries they have is a lot of innings and a lot of appearances for guys who are on this cusp. So like, unless you want to see like a whole lot of Brian Shaw, just thanklessly taking the ball every day and just like looking miserable about it, cause he just has that kind of demeanor. You're better off like having just a cast of thousands to try to, take some of these appearances on because, best case scenario, like you find somebody who sticks for maybe next year, or at least goes into spring training with like an inside track on a job. Worst case scenario, like you have at least more people to cycle through, kind of just like going through, cannon fodder to basically just get through the rest of the season. So the more bodies, the better in this regard. When you trade 6 pitchers, nearly half of your active 26-man roster pitching staff. And it's fine. Like, and certainly costs them nothing besides the cash considerations. And you always have to say cash considerations because like, basically they bought them, but it's not good to talk about like buying humans.
Yeah.
So that's why, cash considerations is, as awkward as it is and as euphemistic as it is, like we're better off sticking to that.
Yeah, so that was the trade deadline for the Chicago White Sox, and that wraps up as far as this podcast episode. I'd love to have the energy to talk about this series between the White Sox and Rangers. I do not think it's going to go well. The first game did not go well for the White Sox as Andrew Heaney struck out 11 batters in 6 innings. Jesse Schultz, he did a really good job for the White Sox going 6 innings, allowing just 1 run. He had a career high at 6 strikeouts, so that was really nice to see, and we'll probably see Max Scherzer start the Thursday game against the Chicago White Sox, which is going to be interesting and a little bit fascinating. Scherzer joining the Rangers, Justin Verlander joining the Houston Astros again, so that'll be kind of fun in the American League West. But yeah, the product on the field in Chicago, we're going to try to do our best, folks, as far as what is going on. But in future episodes, we may talk about other things around Major League Baseball that do not concern the Chicago White Sox, and this episode gives us an opportunity after the trade deadline to talk about the activities that were made. So if you want to know what happened in the games, definitely go to SoxMachine.com to read the recaps and the day after columns.
Yeah, it's it's funny, like the way the White Sox have played since all these trades, like offense is still the problem. Like I keep waiting for the pitching staff to collapse and like make a total mess of it. But like even in their worst moments, like the game's within reach. It's just the offense still doesn't have anything. And of course, like Cleveland, they go 500 against a team that's selling all its pitching staff, and then they get no hit by Framber Valdez. So
a Maddox.
We could have a whole episode of just, a Maddox. Yeah. And like the Twins did nothing. So, I mean, like that's, I think if I'm Jerry Reinsdorf and I'm, or whoever has like power of attorney there in terms of like making a decision about like what's going on with the front office, just like, this is such a terrible division. Nobody wants it. Everybody is like just running in place or just like, stalling and seeing like if, afraid to make a big consequential move because it might not be worth it. And like the White Sox are like falling behind the Tigers who were trying to trade Eduardo Rodriguez, but couldn't. Like the division's a mess and it's embarrassing. And the fact that they can't get even in the third place in it is like, again, I just want to keep stressing that like the White Sox are behind the Tigers and the Tigers can't trade the pitcher they want to pitch. Like, or they want to trade, like who's their best pitcher. Like this is the, it's a terrible division and the White Sox are fourth.
That was my monologue on Monday's episode and just how sad it is that the White Sox can't take advantage of this terrible situation. And instead they have a 13.5% chance of having the number 1 pick in the 2024 Major League Baseball draft because they have the 4th worst record in baseball.
Yeah, but, given the trade deadline activity, like nobody feels good about their team.
Nope. The Twins didn't even make a move. They stood pat. And they're going to get crushed in the playoffs again. But at least they got there. They can wave their division title banner at Target Field. Yay, we won the 2023 AL Central. Yay. Oh, sad things. At least everywhere else in baseball is very exciting. That's why we'll probably talk more about that in future episodes. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful Wednesday morning as we'll have the White Sox wake-up call for you to recap what happened on Wednesday night and preview Thursday's game. And we'll have Sox Machine Live on Thursday as we preview the upcoming weekend series as the White Sox do travel to Cleveland and we get back on track. But if you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. We also upload our podcast episodes into our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to at youtube.com/SoxMachine. You can follow us on social media. We're at Sox Machine for Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh on all 3 of those as well. If you enjoy our work and want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where we have monthly plans starting at $2, and our Patreon supporters get exclusive content, ad-free versions of both the podcast and website, and our new Sox Machine swag, including our new I Heart Wild Pitch offense that you can get out of the Sox Machine store. We also have annual subscriptions. Again, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.